Silence is not weakness. Silence is pressure. In a loud world, the person who stays quiet controls the room. While others rush to explain, justify, and react, you wait. And waiting changes the power dynamic. This audiobook will teach you why silence unsettles people, why it exposes insecurity, and why the calmest person always decides the outcome. You have a choice: react emotionally or dominate psychologically. This book shows you how silence becomes your strongest weapon. Chapter 1: Silence is not passive. It's dominance. Most people misunderstand silence. They think silence means you have nothing to say. They think it means you are unsure. They think it means you are losing. That belief is exactly why silence works. Silence is not passive. Silence is action without movement. That's the key. When everyone else is reacting, explaining, defending, justifying, you stay still. And stillness creates pressure. You have a choice. You can join the noise, or you can control the moment. Silence is not about being quiet. It's about refusing to play the emotional game others are desperate to win. Watch carefully how people behave in tense situations. When tension rises, weak people speed up. They talk faster. They say more. They reveal themselves. Strong people slow down. They don't rush to fill the space. They let the silence expand. And in that expansion, power shifts. People mistake calm for weakness until they feel the pressure. That pressure comes from uncertainty. When you stay silent, others don't know where they stand with you. And the human mind hates uncertainty. That's the key. Silence forces people to project their own fears onto you. They assume. They overthink. They second-guess themselves. Meanwhile, you stay centered. It's not about saying less. It's about controlling the moment. Most people speak to relieve their own discomfort. They talk because silence makes them anxious. They talk because they want reassurance. They talk because they want control but don't realize silence is the real control. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to think. You don't need their permission to say nothing. That's the discipline. Silence is dominance because it forces others to react to you, while you remain unreactive. And whoever reacts first loses leverage. You see this everywhere. In arguments, in negotiations, in relationships, in the workplace. One person raises their voice. The other stays calm. The loud one thinks they're winning. They're wrong. The calm one is watching, measuring, choosing. You have a choice. React emotionally or respond deliberately. That pause between stimulus and response is where dominance lives. Most people never pause. They fire back instantly. They defend instantly. They explain instantly. And in doing so, they give away control. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Silence requires strength because it denies the ego its favorite habit: reaction. Your ego wants to be heard. Your ego wants to be right. Your ego wants immediate relief. Silence says no. Silence says, I don't need to prove anything. Silence says, I'm not threatened. Silence says, I decide when this moment moves forward. That's the key. When you stop reacting, people start adjusting themselves around you. They soften their tone. They explain more. They reveal more than they intended. Why? Because silence feels like judgment even when it isn't. And that perceived judgment creates pressure. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to dominate physically. You don't need to outtalk anyone. You just need to hold your frame. Silence is how you hold it. This is where most people get it wrong. They think silence is avoidance. It's not. Avoidance is running away internally. Silence is standing your ground internally. You can be fully present and say nothing. You can be fully engaged and remain quiet. You can be fully in control without uttering a word. That takes training. So here's the behavioral shift you must make. Stop filling space. When there's an awkward pause, don't rush to fix it. When someone challenges you, don't respond immediately. When emotions rise, slow everything down. Count. Breathe. Wait. That waiting is not weakness. That's dominance. You have a choice in every interaction. Speak to satisfy your emotions, or stay silent to control the outcome. That's the key. Notice how authority figures operate. They don't rush. They don't over-explain. They don't chase agreement. Their silence signals certainty, and certainty creates gravity. People lean in. They listen harder. They pay attention. Silence pulls energy toward you. Noise pushes it away. It's not about being mysterious. It's about being grounded. When you speak less, your words carry more weight. When you react less, your presence carries more authority. This is why calm people feel intimidating without trying to be. They don't compete. They don't convince. They don't chase. They wait. And waiting flips the power dynamic. You don't need their validation. You don't need to win the argument. You don't need to be understood immediately. That's discipline. Silence trains your nervous system. It teaches your body that you are safe even under pressure. And once your body believes that, your mind becomes clear. Clarity leads to control. Control leads to dominance. This is not a trick. This is a way of operating. You will feel uncomfortable at first. That's normal. Discomfort is the price of growth. Every time you resist the urge to react, you strengthen the habit. Every time you choose silence, you build authority. You have a choice. React and feel momentary relief, or stay silent and gain long-term control. Silence is action without movement. That's the key. And now that you understand silence as dominance, it's time to learn what happens next. Because silence doesn't just control you, it controls the interaction. You've learned why silence is power. Now let's talk about when to use it and why speaking too soon costs you leverage. Chapter 2. The first person who speaks loses leverage. The moment tension enters a room, a silent rule activates. Whoever speaks first gives something away. Most people don't realize this. They rush to talk. They rush to explain. They rush to defend. And in that rush, they expose neediness. Speaking too fast reveals insecurity. It reveals the need to be liked, the need to be understood, the need to regain comfort. You don't need their permission to pause. That's the key. When you speak immediately, you signal that the moment controls you. When you wait, you signal that you control the moment. You have a choice. Respond instantly or respond strategically. Instant reactions feel powerful. They are not. They are emotional reflexes. Strategic responses feel uncomfortable at first. But discomfort is the entry fee to control. Most people talk because silence feels dangerous to them. They believe silence equals losing ground. They believe if they don't speak now, they'll lose the upper hand. That belief is backward. Silence forces the other person to move first. And the first person who moves exposes their position. That's the leverage. Think about negotiations. The side that rushes to fill silence starts making concessions. They clarify more than necessary. They justify. They weaken their stance. The calm side waits, and waiting creates pressure. Silence is not empty space. It's a mirror. When you stay quiet, the other person hears their own thoughts. They notice their own anxiety. They feel the imbalance. So they speak. They add details they didn't plan to share. They explain motivations. They reveal priorities. That's the key. Silence makes people talk themselves into vulnerability. You don't need to interrupt. You don't need to corner them. You don't need to out-argue them. Just don't rush. In everyday life, this shows up constantly. Someone criticizes you. Your instinct is to defend. Someone questions your decision. Your instinct is to explain. Someone doubts you. Your instinct is to prove. That instinct is the flaw. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. The discipline to let silence do the work for you. You have a choice in every interaction. Speak to satisfy your ego, or wait to maintain leverage. That's the key. Silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you're choosing when to say it. Timing creates power. A delayed response feels heavier, more intentional, more authoritative. Quick speech feels reactive, light, disposable. When you slow down your speech, you slow down the entire exchange. That shift changes the hierarchy instantly. People unconsciously defer to the person who is not rushed. Why? Because calm suggests certainty, and certainty suggests power. You don't need their permission to be calm. Now let's get practical. Here's what you stop doing. Stop answering immediately. Stop filling pauses. Stop over-explaining your decisions. Here's what you start doing. Pause before responding. Let silence breathe. Allow the other person to continue. Count to 3 internally before you speak. Not 1. Not 2. 3. That pause is short but powerful. Communicates that you are thinking, not reacting. That you are choosing your words, not spilling them. That's discipline. In arguments, silence does something even stronger. It drains momentum. Arguments require 2 emotional participants. When one side goes quiet, the emotional charge collapses. The other person keeps talking. Their intensity peaks. Then it fades. You stay steady. That steadiness makes their emotion look excessive, uncontrolled, weak. Silence doesn't escalate conflict. It exposes it. You don't need to win the argument. You need to outlast it. That's the key. This applies to leadership as well. Leaders who speak too much dilute authority. They narrate every decision. They explain every move. Strong leaders speak when it matters and stop when it doesn't. Their silence signals trust in themselves. People follow certainty, not noise. Now understand this clearly. Silence is not manipulation. It's self-control. You are not using silence to trap others. You are using silence to prevent yourself from giving away power. Power leaks through impulsive speech. Every unnecessary word is a small concession. So you must ask yourself one question before speaking. Is this necessary? Or is this emotional? If it's emotional, stay quiet. You have a choice. Most people never ask that question. They speak to relieve tension. They speak to feel safe. You don't need that safety. You need leverage. Silence trains your nervous system to tolerate uncertainty. And once you can tolerate uncertainty, you control it. That's discipline. Over time, something interesting happens. People start choosing their words more carefully around you. They sense your pause. They feel your stillness. They adjust. You didn't demand respect. You created it. That's the key. You don't need to dominate conversations. You need to dominate timing. Timing is leverage. Leverage is power. And power doesn't rush. The first person who speaks loses leverage because they reveal urgency. And urgency is weakness. Not moral weakness. Strategic weakness. It's not about being cold. It's about being controlled. Silence gives you that control. You have a choice. Speak fast and feel temporary relief, or wait and feel long-term authority. This chapter taught you when silence creates leverage. But there's something deeper happening when you stay quiet. Because silence doesn't just shift conversations. It exposes people. You've learned why speaking first costs you power. Now let's look at what silence does to insecure minds. Chapter 3. Silence makes insecure people uncomfortable. Silence doesn't bother strong people. It exposes weak ones. That distinction matters. Emotionally secure people don't need constant feedback. They don't need reassurance. They don't need validation every second to feel grounded. Insecure people do. They need reactions to feel safe. They need approval to feel stable. They need emotional signals to know where they stand. That's the key. When you stay silent, their safety disappears. And when safety disappears, insecurity starts talking. You have a choice. You can manage other people's emotions, or you can let silence reveal the truth. Most people spend their lives trying to make others comfortable. They explain to reduce tension. They reassure to calm anxiety. They speak to smooth things over. That habit is a trap. It's not about kindness. It's about avoidance. And avoidance costs you power. Insecure people depend on external signals. They measure their worth by reactions. They track facial expressions, tone changes, responses. When you remove those signals, their mind fills the gap. And it never fills it positively. That's the key. Silence turns their attention inward. And what they find inside is uncertainty. Uncertainty leads to assumptions. Assumptions lead to fear. Fear leads to exposure. They start wondering, did I say something wrong? Are they judging me? Are they upset? Am I losing control of this interaction? Meanwhile, you're doing nothing. You're just not reacting. This is why silence feels powerful. Not because you're attacking, but because you're not rescuing. It's not about intimidation. It's about emotional imbalance. One person is calm. The other is unsettled. That imbalance shifts the dynamic instantly. Insecure people cannot tolerate emotional neutrality. They need confirmation, so they push. They talk more. They justify. They overshare. They reveal motivations they never intended to reveal. Silence pulls information out of people without asking. That's the key. You don't need to interrogate. You don't need to pressure. You don't need to confront. Just stay still. In daily life, you see this constantly. Someone tells a story and pauses. You don't respond immediately. They keep talking. They add details. They clarify. They expose insecurity. Someone makes a bold statement. You stay quiet. They soften it. They walk it back. They explain themselves. Why? Because insecure minds cannot sit with ambiguity. They need closure. They need resolution. They need reassurance. You don't need to provide it. That's discipline. This chapter is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming neutral. Neutrality is terrifying to insecure people, because neutrality gives them nothing to grab onto. No praise, no resistance, no validation, just silence. And silence forces self-reflection. Most people avoid self-reflection at all costs. They drown it out with noise, with talking, with reacting. Silence removes the distraction. And insecurity hates being alone with itself. You have a choice. You can protect people from their discomfort, or you can let discomfort do its work. That's the key. Now let's make something very clear. This is not about manipulating people. It's about refusing to manage emotions that aren't yours. Emotionally weak people outsource regulation. They expect others to stabilize them. Strong people self-regulate. Silence is how you stop absorbing other people's instability. Here's the behavior shift. Stop trying to fix emotional tension. Stop filling silence to make others feel better. Stop explaining to ease their anxiety. That's not your responsibility. It's not about empathy. It's about boundaries. Silence is a boundary. It says, I am not responsible for your emotional comfort. That boundary creates respect. Insecure people may react negatively at first. They may become louder, more dramatic, more emotional. That's not strength. That's desperation. And desperation always exposes itself. You stay calm. You stay silent. You let the imbalance play out. That's the key. Over time, one of two things happens. Either they regulate themselves and rise to your level, or they reveal how unstable they are. Both outcomes work in your favor, because clarity is power. Silence gives you clarity about who you're dealing with, who can handle uncertainty, who can't, who is emotionally strong, who is emotionally dependent. That information is invaluable. You don't get it by talking. You get it by waiting. You don't need their permission to wait. This applies deeply in relationships. Insecure partners demand constant reassurance. They interpret silence as rejection. They panic when they don't get immediate responses. That panic is not love. It's fear. And fear demands control. Silence exposes that need for control. You have a choice. Feed the insecurity or let it surface. Feeding it trains dependence. Letting it surface reveals reality. That's discipline. Silence also protects you. When someone is emotionally charged, reacting pulls you into their state. You absorb their chaos. Silence blocks that transfer. You stay centered. They stay exposed. It's not about being superior. It's about being grounded. Grounded people don't chase emotional alignment. They let others come to them. That's the key. Now understand this. Insecure people will often accuse you of being cold, distant, uncaring. That accusation is projection. They are uncomfortable with their own emotions and blaming you for it. Don't take the bait. You don't need to defend your silence. You don't need to explain it. Explaining breaks the frame. Silence is the frame. And frames create power. You have a choice. React to accusations or let silence hold its position. Strong people let silence stand. Because silence doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It doesn't negotiate. It just is. And that presence is unsettling to those who lack internal stability. That's the key. As you practice this, you'll notice a shift. You become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to control. People stop testing you emotionally because they don't get feedback. And without feedback, manipulation dies. Silence starves insecurity. This chapter taught you who silence affects most. Not everyone, only the insecure. Now it's time to go one level deeper. Because once you understand how silence exposes insecurity, you must stop the habit that feeds it. You've seen how silence unsettles the emotionally weak. Now let's talk about the behavior that gives them power over you. Chapter 4. Stop explaining yourself. Most people talk too much, not because they have something important to say, but because they are uncomfortable standing on their decision. They explain to feel safe. They justify to reduce tension. They narrate to calm their own doubt. That's the flaw. Explanations signal self-doubt. Silence signals certainty. That's the key. When you explain yourself unnecessarily, you send a message. Not with your words, but with your behavior. You say, I need you to understand me. I need you to agree. I need your approval to stand here. You don't need their permission. Strong people don't narrate their decisions. They make them, they stand on them, and they let reality speak for them. You have a choice. Explain to feel accepted, or remain silent and remain solid. Most people choose acceptance. They sacrifice authority for comfort, and they don't even realize they're doing it. Look at how explanations usually sound. I did this because I didn't mean it like that. Let me explain. What I was trying to say was, every one of those phrases leaks power. Not because explaining is always wrong, but because over-explaining is emotional. It's not about clarity. It's about insecurity. That's the key. People who are certain don't rush to justify. They don't scramble to be understood. They don't defend every move. They wait, and waiting communicates confidence. Silence says, I'm comfortable with my decision, even if you aren't. That comfort is intimidating. Now understand this clearly. This chapter is not about being rude. It's about being unmovable. There's a difference. Rude people explain nothing because they don't care. Strong people explain little because they trust themselves. That's discipline. When you stop explaining, something uncomfortable happens. People push back. They ask more questions. They challenge your reasoning. They demand clarity, not because they're confused, but because they're testing your stability. And this is where most people fail. They cave. They add more words, more detail, more justification, and with every sentence they shrink. You have a choice. Hold your ground or hand it over. That's the key. Explanations create a negotiation where none is needed. When you explain, you invite debate. When you stay silent, you set a boundary. Strong people don't debate their core decisions. They don't seek consensus for personal choices. They act. And action carries authority. Think about leaders you respect. They don't explain everything. They don't narrate every step. They don't convince people verbally. They decide and others adjust. That's power. Now let's talk behavior. Here's what you stop doing. Stop justifying your boundaries. Stop explaining your preferences. Stop defending your pace, your priorities, your choices. You don't owe the world a detailed report on your life. Here's what you start doing. State your decision once. Briefly, calmly, then stop talking. That pause after your statement is critical. That's where certainty lives. For example, I'm not available. I've decided not to. That doesn't work for me. Then silence. No story. No apology. No explanation. If someone presses you, repeat the statement. Don't expand it. Repetition without elaboration is strength. That's the key. People who can't stand your silence will try to provoke explanation. They'll say you're cold, unclear, unfair. That's pressure. Pressure exists to make you move. Don't. It's not about stubbornness. It's about self-trust. You trust your decision enough to let it stand alone. That trust changes how people treat you. They stop negotiating with you emotionally. They start respecting your limits. Explanations train people to push. Silence trains them to stop. That's discipline. Now let's address the fear underneath over-explaining. The fear is rejection. People explain because they fear being misunderstood. They fear being judged. They fear conflict. But silence doesn't create conflict. It reveals it. If someone reacts aggressively to your calm boundary, the problem is not your silence. It's their entitlement. You don't need to soothe entitlement. You have a choice. Appease it or expose it. That's the key. This applies deeply in relationships. Over-explaining trains imbalance. One person justifies, the other evaluates. That creates hierarchy and you're on the lower end. Silence corrects that instantly. When you stop explaining, relationships recalibrate. Some people respect it. Others resist it. Both outcomes are useful. Respect means alignment. Resistance means dependency. Silence shows you who belongs in your life. Strong connections don't require constant justification. Weak ones do. Now understand this. Silence does not mean secrecy. It means selectivity. You choose when explanation is useful, not when it's emotional. If clarity genuinely serves the situation, speak. If explanation serves only discomfort, don't. It's not about saying less. It's about saying enough. That's discipline. You don't need to perform certainty. You need to practice it. And certainty grows through action, not words. Every time you resist the urge to explain, you strengthen your internal authority. You prove to yourself that you can stand alone. That's the real shift. External silence builds internal confidence. Internal confidence creates calm. Calm creates power. That's the chain. You have a choice in every moment of pressure. Talk to relieve tension, or stay silent and let certainty do the work. Strong people choose the second, not because it feels good, but because it works. This chapter taught you what to stop doing. Stop explaining yourself. Now it's time to understand what happens next. Because when you stop explaining, people start reacting differently. Some respect you, some test you, and emotional reactions are the next thing that can destroy your authority. You've learned how silence signals certainty. Now let's talk about what happens when emotions take over. Chapter 5. Silence forces respect without demanding it. Respect cannot be begged for, cannot be negotiated, and it cannot be chased. The moment you chase respect, you lose it. That's the key. Loud people ask for attention. They speak over others. They explain more. They perform confidence. Silent people don't ask. They command attention by not needing it. You have a choice. Chase validation or build gravity. Gravity pulls. It doesn't beg. When you talk too much, you broadcast need. When you stay calm, you project certainty. Certainty creates respect. Most people confuse respect with approval. They are not the same. Approval is emotional. Respect is structural. Approval depends on how others feel about you. Respect depends on how you hold yourself. That's discipline. When you don't chase validation, respect follows naturally. Not because people suddenly like you more, but because they sense you don't need them to. You don't need their permission. Now understand the pattern. People who demand respect talk about respect constantly. They complain about being disrespected. They explain why they deserve more. That behavior repels respect. It signals insecurity. Respect responds to self-control, not self-promotion. That's the key. Silence forces respect because it removes the transaction. There's no performance, no persuasion, no emotional exchange, just presence. Presence is heavier than words. When you walk into a room calm and quiet, people notice. Not because you announce yourself, but because you don't. Silence creates contrast. Contrast creates attention. Attention turns into respect when it's anchored by certainty. You have a choice in how you show up. Perform or hold frame. Holding frame means you don't adjust yourself to be accepted. Others adjust to you. That's discipline. Let's talk about validation. Validation is addictive. Likes, praise, agreement. The more you chase it, the more you need it. And the more you need it, the less respect you get. Because neediness is visible, even when it's subtle. Especially when it's subtle. People feel it. Silence breaks the addiction. When you stop seeking reactions, you stop depending on them. When you stop depending on them, you become stable. When you become stable, others feel it. Stability creates trust. Trust creates respect. That's the chain. Loud people try to control how they are perceived. Silent people let behavior speak. Behavior never lies. When you don't rush to defend yourself, people assume confidence. When you don't chase approval, people assume strength. They may be wrong, but perception is power. And silence shapes perception better than words ever could. That's the key. Now let's be clear. This is not about being aloof. It's not about ignoring people. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about not negotiating your worth. You don't need their approval to stand upright. That's discipline. Here's the behavioral shift. Stop asking questions that seek validation. Is that okay? Do you think this makes sense? Are you sure? Replace them with statements. This is what I'm doing. This is my decision. This is the plan. Then pause. Let silence absorb the moment. That pause does more than any explanation ever will. Communicates finality. Finality earns respect. You have a choice. Speak to be liked, or stay silent to be respected. Now understand something uncomfortable. Some people will like you less when you stop chasing validation. They benefited from your need. When you remove it, the dynamic shifts. They may test you. They may push boundaries. They may provoke reactions. Don't take the bait. Respect doesn't arrive instantly. It consolidates over time. Consistency is what makes silence powerful. One calm moment is coincidence. Repeated calm is identity. Identity creates reputation. Reputation creates respect. That's the key. Silence also prevents you from overselling yourself. Overselling is insecurity dressed as confidence. You don't need to convince people of your value. Your standards do that. When you say less, your yes becomes valuable. Your no becomes firm. And firmness is respected. People don't respect flexibility without boundaries. They exploit it. Silence reinforces boundaries without confrontation. It says, "This is where I stand." No argument. No explanation. Just position. That's discipline. Now apply this to conflict. When someone disrespects you verbally, your instinct is to respond loudly, to correct them, to assert dominance. That instinct is emotional. Silence does something smarter. It removes the reward. Disrespect feeds on reaction. No reaction, no fuel. You stay calm. You hold eye contact. You say nothing. The other person feels exposed. They expected resistance. They got stillness. Stillness reframes the situation. Suddenly, they look unstable. You look grounded. That's the key. Respect often comes from contrast. You're calm against their chaos. Your silence against their noise. You don't need to win the exchange. You need to win the frame. The frame is who appears in control. Control is quiet. Always has been. This also applies internally. When you stop chasing validation, you respect yourself more. And self-respect is visible. It shows in posture, in pacing, in tone. People respond to what you embody, not what you say. You have a choice. Build inner authority or perform outer confidence. Inner authority doesn't speak much. It doesn't need to. That's discipline. Silence trains patience. Patience trains restraint. Restraint trains respect. First from yourself, then from others. You don't need to demand respect. You need to remove behaviors that undermine it. Stop over-talking. Stop over-explaining. Stop chasing reactions. Let silence do the work. Because silence forces respect without asking for it. That's the paradox. The less you ask for respect, the more you receive. Not from everyone, but from the right people. And the wrong people reveal themselves quickly. That clarity is power. You've learned how silence builds respect externally. But there's one thing that can still destroy it instantly. Emotional reactions. You can be silent, but if you're emotionally reactive, authority collapses. So now we go deeper. You've learned how silence commands respect. Now let's talk about what happens when emotions take control, and how to shut that down. Chapter 6. Emotional reactions destroy authority. The fastest way to lose authority is to react emotionally. Not slowly, instantly. One emotional outburst hands over control. Every time. That's the key. Authority is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not expressive. Authority is stable. The moment you explode, defend, snap, or panic, the balance shifts. You may feel powerful for a second, but you've already lost the position. You have a choice. React emotionally or remain in command. Emotions are natural. Reactions are optional. Most people confuse the two. They say, "I couldn't help it." They're wrong. They didn't lack emotion. They lacked restraint. It's not about anger. It's about discipline. When you react emotionally, you reveal your triggers. You show people where to push. You give them the map. That map will be used again. Silence removes the map. That's the key. Authority depends on unpredictability, not chaos control. When people know what will trigger you, they control you. When they don't, you control the interaction. Emotional reactions make you predictable. Predictability kills power. Think about any figure you've respected. A leader, a mentor, calm presence in crisis. They didn't react first. They observed. They waited. Silence buys time, and time creates power. That pause between stimulus and response is everything. Inside that pause, you regain choice. Without the pause, you are a reflex. With the pause, you are an authority. You have a choice. Most people never pause. They let emotion decide for them. They speak while heated. They act while triggered. They commit while unstable. Then they wonder why respect disappears. Respect can't survive chaos. Even justified anger destroys authority if it's uncontrolled. That's uncomfortable to hear, but it's true. It's not about being right. It's about being effective. You can be right and powerless, or calm and in control. That's the key. Now let's talk about what emotional reactions really are. They're bids for relief. You react because the feeling is uncomfortable. You want it gone. You want release. So you speak. You lash out. You defend. And in doing so, you trade long-term authority for short-term relief. That trade is always bad. Restraint delays relief but builds power. Power lasts longer. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to calm yourself. Here's the discipline. When emotion rises, do nothing. Not forever. Just long enough for clarity to return. Breathe. Slow your body. Lower your voice or don't speak at all. Silence buys you time. Time allows your nervous system to settle. A settled system thinks clearly. Clear thinking leads to controlled action. That's the chain. Most people never let the system settle. They act at peak emotion. Peak emotion is the worst time to decide anything. Arguments are lost there. Negotiations are destroyed there. Relationships are damaged there. Authority never survives there. You have a choice. Act at the peak or wait for the valley. Strong people wait. Waiting doesn't mean weakness. It means mastery. Now let's be precise. This chapter is not telling you to suppress emotion. Suppression stores pressure. Stored pressure explodes later. Restraint is different. Restraint is awareness without reaction. You feel the emotion. You don't obey it. That's discipline. Emotional reactions also teach people how to manipulate you. They learn your patterns. They know if they insult you, you'll snap. If they accuse you, you'll defend. If they rush you, you'll comply. Silence breaks the pattern. When you don't react, manipulation fails. That's the key. Now let's move into behavior. What do you stop doing? Stop responding while emotionally charged. Stop sending messages when angry. Stop speaking when your voice is tight. Those are warning signs. What do you start doing? Delay. Pause. Create space. Say less or say nothing. You can always speak later. You can't take back a reaction. Authority depends on reversibility. Silence is reversible. Outbursts are not. That's discipline. Here's a simple rule. If your heart rate is up, your words are down. No exceptions. Silence until the body settles. Then decide. This single rule will change how people perceive you, because people don't remember what you felt. They remember how you behaved. Calm behavior under pressure creates legend. Emotional reactions create doubt. Now understand something deeper. People test authority emotionally. They provoke. They push. They poke. They want to see if you'll crack. If you do, they escalate. If you don't, they stop. Silence is how you pass the test. You don't need to win the exchange. You need to hold the frame. The frame is who is in control emotionally. Control is quiet. Always. You have a choice in every provocation. Take the bait or let it die. Bait dies in silence. That's the key. This applies internally too. When you react emotionally to yourself, self-criticism, panic, frustration, you lose self-authority. You spiral. Silence works internally as well. Pause the internal dialogue. Stop narrating failure. Let the emotion pass without commentary. Emotions rise and fall naturally if you don't fuel them. Silence starves them. That's discipline. Over time, restraint becomes your default. You stop being hijacked by mood. You stop being ruled by impulse. People notice. They stop pushing you emotionally. They stop testing your boundaries. Because emotional reactions no longer work on you. That's power. This chapter taught you what destroys authority fastest. Emotion without restraint. You now know the antidote. Silence. Pause. Time. Time creates power. And power doesn't rush. You've learned how to protect authority from emotional collapse. Now it's time to see something even more revealing. Because silence doesn't just protect power. It exposes who actually has it. You've mastered restraint. Now let's learn how to read the room. Chapter 7. Silence reveals who has power. Power reveals itself under pressure. Not when things are easy. Not when everyone agrees. But when tension enters the room. That's the moment to watch. Watch who talks when tension rises. The one who speaks first is usually the one trying to regain control. The one who fills the silence is usually the one who feels it the most. That's the key. Silence exposes hierarchy without words. Most people misunderstand hierarchy. They think it's about titles, about status, about dominance displays. They're wrong. Hierarchy is emotional. Who is stable? Who is reactive? Who can sit in discomfort without moving? That's where power actually lives. You have a choice. Compete for control or observe who already has it. When tension rises, weak power speeds up. Strong power slows down. Fast speech. Rapid explanations. Nervous laughter. Over-justifying. These are not signs of confidence. They are signs of instability. Silence is the opposite. Silence says, I'm not threatened. Silence says, I don't need to rush. Silence says, this moment doesn't control me. That's the key. The one who stays calm holds the frame. The frame is the emotional context of the interaction. Who decides the pace? Who defines what matters? Who sets the tone? Frames don't come from arguments. They come from presence. Presence is quiet. When someone raises their voice and you don't, you didn't lose ground. You gained it. When someone pressures and you pause, you didn't retreat. You repositioned. You have a choice. Match energy or dominate timing. Timing beats volume. Always. Silence exposes hierarchy because it removes performance. No gestures. No speeches. No displays. Just control. And control is visible. People feel it even if they can't explain it. Now observe this pattern in real life. In meetings, the most powerful person often speaks the least. They let others talk. They let ideas surface. They let mistakes reveal themselves. Then they speak once, briefly, decisively, and the room shifts. That shift is authority. It didn't come from words. It came from silence before them. That's the key. People with power don't rush to assert it. They don't need to. People without power rush constantly. They're afraid silence will expose them. And it does. Watch who interrupts when tension appears. Watch who overreacts to small challenges. Watch who needs to be heard immediately. Those behaviors reveal insecurity. Silence reveals the opposite. Now let's talk about you. Most people give away power because they can't tolerate uncertainty. They feel awkward. They feel judged. They feel exposed. So they speak. They fill the gap. They relieve the pressure. But the pressure was working in their favor. You don't need their permission to let silence stand. That's discipline. Silence creates asymmetry. One person is calm. The other is unsettled. Asymmetry creates hierarchy. Hierarchy creates influence. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to enforce it. It emerges. That's the key. Here's a hard truth. If silence makes you uncomfortable, you are not in control yet. Discomfort reveals where training is needed. The goal is not to look calm. The goal is to be calm. Looking calm is performance. Being calm is power. Now understand this. Silence is not about winning social games. It's about seeing reality clearly. Silence lets you read the room. When you stop talking, you start noticing. Who is nervous? Who is defensive? Who is trying to dominate? Who is trying to please? Speech hides patterns. Silence reveals them. That's the key. Most people miss power dynamics because they're too busy participating. They argue. They defend. They explain. They're inside the frame. Silence pulls you outside the frame. From there, you can see who holds leverage and why. This is especially important in conflict. In heated moments, power shifts rapidly. Who escalates? Who de-escalates? Who stays centered? The centered one wins long-term. Not because they defeated anyone, but because they didn't lose themselves. You have a choice. Engage emotionally or observe strategically. Observation creates leverage. Leverage creates power. Power doesn't need to prove itself. Now let's talk about hierarchy without words. Words can lie. Silence cannot. People say they're confident. Their silence or lack of it reveals the truth. People claim authority. Their reactions expose reality. Silence cuts through narratives. That's why it's threatening. That's why insecure people try to break it. They'll ask questions, make jokes, create drama, anything to force movement. Don't move. The one who can hold still longest owns the moment. That's the key. Here's the behavioral shift. When tension rises, don't speak first. When challenged, pause. When pressured, slow everything down. Let others reveal themselves. You don't need to expose anyone. Silence does it for you. This takes practice. Your body will want to react. Your mind will invent reasons to speak. Ignore both. Silence is not absence. It's presence under control. Presence without movement. That's discipline. Now understand the payoff. When you master this, people treat you differently. They check their tone. They choose their words. They hesitate before pushing. Not because you demanded respect, but because your stillness commands it. Hierarchy settles naturally around calm. Always has. This applies internally too. Inside your own mind, silence reveals who has power. Is it impulse, fear, emotion, or is it you? When you can sit with internal tension without reacting, you reclaim authority over yourself. And self-authority is the foundation of all external power. You don't need their permission to be still. Now connect this chapter to the whole book. Silence is not passive. It's not avoidance. It's not weakness. Silence is a diagnostic tool. It shows you who is in control. In the room, in the relationship, and inside yourself. You've learned how silence reveals power dynamics without a single word. Now it's time to use that knowledge actively. Because seeing power is one thing. Ending chaos is another. You can read the room. Now you need to shut down conflict completely. You've learned who holds power when tension rises. Now let's use silence to end conflict at the source. Chapter 8. Use silence to end arguments instantly. Arguments don't start with logic. They start with emotion. That's the key. An argument is not a discussion. It's an emotional exchange looking for fuel. And here's the rule most people never learn. Arguments need two emotional participants. Take one away and the argument dies. You have a choice. Feed drama or starve it. Most people feed it without realizing it. Someone raises their voice. They respond. Someone accuses. They defend. Someone provokes. They react. The argument survives because emotion is flowing both ways. Silence cuts the supply. When you withdraw reaction, the conflict collapses. That's not theory. That's mechanics. Emotion needs resistance to stay alive. Without resistance, it burns out. Most people argue because they want resolution now. They want to be heard now. They want relief now. That urgency is the flaw. It's not about communication. It's about impulse. You have a choice. Let impulse speak or let discipline decide. That's the key. Silence doesn't mean you agree. It doesn't mean you lose. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you refuse to play an unwinnable game. Because arguments are unwinnable in the moment. Even if you win, you lose authority. You look reactive, emotional, unstable. Authority never argues emotionally. Authority waits. Silence buys time. Time lowers emotion. Lower emotion restores control. Control is the goal. Not being right. Not being loud. Not being justified. Control. You don't need their permission to stay calm. Now let's break this down clearly. When someone argues with you, they are doing one thing, trying to move you emotionally. If they succeed, they control the interaction. If they fail, the interaction ends. That's the key. Arguments collapse when one side refuses to move. Not physically, emotionally. You stay still. They keep pushing. Then they run out of energy. Watch it happen. They repeat themselves. They escalate. Then they stall. Without reaction, their words lose power. Silence exposes the emptiness of the conflict. Now understand this deeply. Silence is not avoidance if it's intentional. Avoidance runs away. Silence stands firm. You can be present and silent at the same time. That takes discipline. Most people fear silence in arguments because they think it means losing control. They're wrong. Speaking emotionally is losing control. Silence is how you keep it. You have a choice in every heated moment. escalate or de-escalate. Silence is de-escalation without surrender. That's the key. Let's talk about drama. Drama feeds on attention. Remove attention, drama starves. When you react emotionally, you reward the behavior. You teach people that provoking you works. When you don't react, the lesson reverses. Provocation stops when it no longer pays. Silence removes the payoff. That's discipline. Now let's make this practical. Here's what you stop doing immediately. Stop arguing to be understood. Stop defending yourself mid-emotion. Stop explaining while the other person is heated. Nothing useful happens there. Here's what you start doing. Pause. Lower your energy. Say less or say nothing. If words are necessary, keep them short. I hear you. I'm not discussing this right now. We'll talk later. Then silence. No follow-up. No justification. No emotional tone. That pause is not empty. It's active control. That's the key. Your body will resist this at first. Your heart rate will rise. Your chest will tighten. Your mind will race. That's normal. That's conditioning leaving the body. Discipline feels uncomfortable before it feels powerful. You have a choice. Relieve discomfort or build authority. Authority is built in discomfort. Now let's address the fear people have. What if they think they won? Let them. Winning arguments is meaningless. Holding authority is everything. People who win arguments emotionally lose respect over time. People who stay calm gain it. Silence doesn't make you small. It makes the argument small. That's the key. This applies everywhere. In relationships, silence stops cycles. Same fight, same trigger, same explosion. Silence breaks the pattern. When you don't respond the way you always have, the loop collapses. They expect reaction. They get calm. The script fails. In the workplace, silence neutralizes power plays. Someone challenges you publicly. You don't defend emotionally. You pause. You respond later or not at all. The aggressor looks reactive. You look composed. Authority shifts. You didn't win the argument. You won the frame. That's discipline. Now let's talk about internal arguments. Most conflict happens inside your own head. You replay conversations. You argue internally. You justify. You defend. That internal noise fuels external reactions. Silence works internally too. When you stop replaying, the emotion fades. When emotion fades, clarity returns. Silence ends internal arguments as well. That's the key. Here's a rule you must adopt. If a conversation becomes emotional, it is no longer productive. Silence it. You can revisit the topic later, when emotion is gone and control is restored. Arguments demand immediacy. Authority prefers delay. Delay creates advantage. You don't need their permission to delay. Now understand this clearly. Silence is not permanent. It's strategic. You're not avoiding issues. You're choosing the right time. Most people address issues at the worst possible moment. Emotion high, ego active, control lost. Silence resets the system. Reset first. Decide later. That's discipline. Over time, something powerful happens. People stop arguing with you. Not because you intimidate them, but because it doesn't work. They don't get reaction. They don't get drama. They don't get payoff. Conflict disappears where it isn't rewarded. Silence removes the reward. You have a choice. Train people to fight with you or train them to stop. Silence trains them to stop. That's the key. This chapter taught you how to end arguments instantly. Not by overpowering. Not by explaining. Not by winning. By withdrawing emotion. By starving drama. By choosing silence. Silence is not weakness. It's control in its purest form. And now that you know how to shut down external chaos, it's time to build something deeper. Because silence doesn't just end arguments. It builds authority inside you. You've learned how to starve drama. Now let's talk about what silence builds internally. Chapter 9. Silence builds inner authority. Outer authority is visible. Inner authority is invisible. And invisible power lasts longer. When you stop reacting, you start leading yourself. That's the key. Most people think leadership is external. They think it's about commanding others, directing others, controlling outcomes. They're wrong. Leadership begins internally. If you can't lead yourself, you can't lead anything else. Silence is how that leadership is built. Every reaction is a loss of command. Every pause is a reclaiming of it. You have a choice. Let emotions drive you, or take the wheel yourself. Reaction feels natural. Leadership does not. Leadership is trained. Inner control creates outer stability. People don't trust chaos. They don't follow instability. They don't respect volatility. They respond to steadiness. And steadiness comes from silence. Silence is not empty. It's structured. It's a deliberate refusal to let impulse decide. When you react immediately, you follow emotion. When you pause, you lead it. That's the difference. You don't need their permission to pause. Most people never experience inner authority because they never stop reacting long enough to feel it. They're always responding, always adjusting, always explaining. They are managed by circumstance. Silence breaks that loop. When you stop reacting, something unfamiliar happens. You feel space. At first, that space is uncomfortable. There's no noise to hide behind. No impulse to obey, just awareness. That awareness is where authority lives. It's not about controlling others. It's about mastering you. That's discipline. Inner authority means you decide your behavior regardless of stimulus. Someone disrespects you. You choose your response. Something goes wrong. You choose your pace. Emotion rises. You choose whether it speaks. Most people never choose. They obey. They obey mood. They obey fear. They obey urgency. You don't have to. You have a choice. Silence is the moment where choice becomes possible. Without silence, there is no gap. Without a gap, there is no decision. Without decision, there is no authority. That's the key. Inner authority feels calm, not excited, not dramatic. Calm is not weakness. Calm is regulation. Regulation is power. When you regulate yourself, the world stops regulating you. People stop pulling you emotionally. Situations stop hijacking your state. You remain centered. Centered people don't need to assert control. They already have it. Now let's talk about stability. Inner control creates outer stability. This means your external life starts to reflect your internal order. Less chaos, fewer emotional spirals, clearer decisions. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become steadier. Steadiness is contagious. People around you slow down. Conversations change tone. Conflicts lose intensity, not because you demand it, but because your presence sets the temperature. That's authority. Authority doesn't shout. It regulates the room by existing. Silence is how that presence is built. Now understand this clearly. Inner authority is not emotional numbness. You still feel. You still care. You still experience. You just don't obey the first impulse. You don't let feelings become commands. That's the difference between awareness and control. Awareness feels emotion. Control decides behavior. Silence sits between the two. That's the key. Most people confuse expression with authenticity. They think reacting honestly makes them real. It doesn't. It makes them predictable. Emotion does not make you human. It makes you readable. Inner authority makes you grounded. Grounded people are not easily read. Not because they hide, but because they don't leak. They don't broadcast insecurity. They don't announce fear. They don't expose urgency. They hold it. Holding is strength. Now let's move into behavior. What do you stop doing? Stop narrating your inner state. Stop reacting out loud. Stop justifying emotions as truth. Emotions are information, not instructions. What do you start doing? Observe before acting. Pause before speaking. Let silence filter impulse. Ask yourself one question in moments of pressure. Am I reacting or choosing? That question builds authority. Every time you choose restraint, inner authority grows. It grows quietly. No one sees it happen. No one applauds it. But everyone feels the result. That's the key. Over time, your internal world changes. You feel less rushed, less pulled, less reactive. You stop needing immediate resolution. Urgency fades. Clarity replaces it. Clarity is power. With clarity, decisions improve. With better decisions, outcomes stabilize. This is how silence reshapes your life from the inside out. Inner authority also changes how you see others. You stop being impressed by volume. You stop being intimidated by emotion. You stop being moved by pressure. You see behavior clearly. And clarity makes manipulation impossible. Manipulation requires reaction. Silence removes it. That's discipline. Now understand something important. Inner authority does not mean isolation. It means independence. You can engage deeply without losing yourself. You can listen fully without absorbing chaos. You can care without surrendering control. Silence gives you that flexibility. You're no longer rigid. You're regulated. That's the key. Most people swing between extremes. Either they explode or they suppress. Both fail. Silence is the middle path. Presence without reaction. Awareness without obedience. That's mastery. You don't need to control others to feel powerful. That's insecurity. You need to control yourself. That's authority. And once you do, something interesting happens. People stop trying to control you. They sense it won't work. They may not understand why, but they feel it. You become harder to rush, harder to provoke, harder to destabilize. You become internally solid. Solid people don't need armor. They don't need defenses. They don't break easily. That's inner authority. You have a choice in every moment of tension. Hand power to impulse, or take it back through silence. Silence is not passive. It's deliberate. It's leadership directed inward. And leadership inward always shows outward. This chapter taught you what silence builds inside you. Not tricks, not tactics, foundation, inner authority. But inner authority is not the end. It's the beginning. Because when inner authority is fully developed, you reach a state few people ever touch. Calm that cannot be shaken. Focus that cannot be hijacked. Presence that cannot be ignored. You become untouchable. You've learned how silence builds inner authority. Now it's time to complete the transformation. Chapter 10. Become untouchable through calm. Calm is not the absence of pressure. It is dominance under pressure. That's the key. Chaos is everywhere. Noise, urgency, emotion. Most people drown in it. Calm people don't. Silence turns chaos into clarity. When everything around you accelerates, calm slows time. When emotions spike, calm sharpens perception. When pressure mounts, calm reveals options. You have a choice. Let chaos decide for you, or let calm put you in control. Calm people are impossible to manipulate, not because they are smarter, not because they are stronger, but because they are unmoved. Manipulation requires reaction. Reaction requires emotion without restraint. Calm removes both. That's the key. Think about how manipulation works. Someone rushes you. They create urgency. They provoke fear. If you react, you comply. Someone insults you. They trigger ego. They bait you into defense. If you react, you lose frame. Someone overwhelms you with emotion, anger, panic, drama. If you absorb it, you surrender control. Calm blocks all of it. Calm doesn't argue. Calm doesn't rush. Calm doesn't defend. Calm waits. And waiting destroys leverage. You don't need their permission to stay calm. Now understand something important. Calm is not a personality. It's a discipline. This is not a trick. It's a lifestyle discipline. You don't turn calm on when convenient. You live it. Because real pressure doesn't announce itself. It hits suddenly. Only discipline survives surprise. Most people are calm only when things are easy. That's not calm. That's comfort. Calm under pressure is rare. And rarity creates power. That's the key. When you live calmly, you stop reacting to noise. You stop chasing certainty. You stop needing immediate answers. You trust yourself to handle what comes next. That trust is visible. People feel it. They stop rushing you. They stop pushing emotionally. They stop trying to control the pace. Because calm people set the pace. Silence turns chaos into clarity because it removes interference. When you stop reacting, your mind stops scattering. Thoughts align. Priorities surface. Clarity emerges naturally. Clarity is not forced. It's revealed. Noise hides it. Silence reveals it. That's the key. Now let's talk about untouchable. Untouchable does not mean distant. It does not mean cold. It does not mean detached from life. It means unshakable. You feel emotion, but it doesn't move you. You hear pressure, but it doesn't rush you. You face conflict, but it doesn't destabilize you. You remain intact. That integrity is power. Most people break under pressure because they identify with emotion. They think, I feel this, therefore I must act. That belief is the flaw. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. You have a choice. Obey feeling or observe it. Observation creates space. Space creates choice. Choice creates authority. That's the chain. Calm people always have options. Reactive people don't. They act immediately. They regret later. Calm delays action until clarity arrives. Clarity always arrives if you wait. Silence buys that time. Time creates power. That's the key. Now let's make this practical. Here's what you stop doing permanently. Stop reacting to urgency. Stop responding while emotional. Stop letting others set your pace. Urgency is often artificial. Pressure is often manufactured. Calm exposes that. Here's what you start doing. Slow your body first. Slow your breath. Lower your voice or don't speak. Let silence enter the moment. Silence is not absence. It's control. When you feel triggered, say nothing. When you feel rushed, pause. When chaos rises, do less. Less movement. Less speech. Less reaction. Calm is subtraction. That's discipline. This lifestyle changes everything. Your decisions improve. Your conflicts decrease. Your presence strengthens. You stop being pulled into nonsense. You stop wasting energy on drama. You stop leaking power through impulse. People notice. They may not say it, but they adjust. They speak more carefully. They hesitate before pushing. They respect your boundaries without you stating them. Because calm communicates finality. Finality without aggression. That's real strength. Now understand this. Calm doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. When you act from calm, action lands harder. Words carry weight. Decisions stick. Because they are not emotional. They are intentional. Intentional action always outperforms reactive action. That's the key. Living calmly also protects you internally. You stop living in constant anticipation. You stop replaying conversations. You stop arguing in your head. Silence ends internal noise. Inner silence creates mental clarity. Mental clarity creates emotional stability. Emotional stability creates external power. This is how calm makes you untouchable. Not by hiding, but by grounding. Now connect this chapter to the entire book. Silence was never about saying nothing. It was about controlling yourself. Silence is dominance. Silence creates leverage. Silence exposes insecurity. Silence ends arguments. Silence builds authority. And calm is the result of mastering silence. This is not a trick you use occasionally. It's a way you live. A discipline you practice daily. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you strengthen it. Every time you pause instead of exploding, you reinforce it. Every time you stay calm when chaos demands emotion, you become more untouchable. You have a choice. Live reactively and stay controllable. Or live calmly and stay free. Freedom is calm. Calm is power. And power that comes from discipline cannot be taken from you. This is the end of the book, but it's the beginning of the practice. From this moment forward, watch your reactions. Choose silence. Choose calm. And notice what changes. Because when you become calm, nothing can move you without your permission. That's the psychology of silence. You've heard the truth. Silence is not empty. It's loaded. Every time you don't react, you gain leverage. Every time you stay calm, you rise above the situation. And every time you choose silence, you take control back. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove. You don't need permission. The world is loud. Be the one who isn't. From this moment forward, notice your reactions. Pause. Hold your silence. That pause is where power lives. The challenge is simple. The next time you feel triggered, say nothing, and watch who loses control.